What's up, guys? Ian here, coach of your Ladner Lanturn, bringing you guys our Week 11 Team Builder, taking on PokeFan and the Detroit Oblivion Wings. We're getting into the absolute heat of things, but we'll talk about that at the end of the Team Builder in terms of playoffs and stuff like that. So if you want to hear me talking about that, maybe just skip until you see the last Pokemon, and then maybe wait a little bit or something. I'm not sure. I'm not going to timestamp because I don't put that much effort in, but um, yeah, we'll get to that later. So. First up, PokeFan's team. Celesteela, Buzzwole, Amoonguss, Alomomola, Miltank, Stunfisk, Mega Diancie, Zygarde 50%, Reuniclus, Torkoal, and Spiritomb. Priority options is just Zygarde with Extreme Speed. Hazard setting, he's got the Miltank with Rocks, Stunfisk with Rocks, Diancie with Rocks, and Torkoal with Rocks. Removal, just the Torkoal with Rapid Spin. 4 times weaknesses, Buzzwole to Flying, Diancie to Steel, and Zygarde to Ice. In terms of what I'm not expecting, pretty much just Torkoal. I don't really think it offers him anything that he couldn't get elsewhere besides just Rapid Spin. And I think that there are just better options against my team for him to bring than Torkoal. So I personally just don't think the Torkoal is coming, but it could, and it could catch me off guard or something. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I have triple water and double ground, so it just doesn't. Fire types aren't really the best against my team, even if they're if they're good breakers, they're probably better. But it might come as like a Cinderace check. I'm expecting a Alomomola to come as the Cinderace check instead. Everything else I think is fair game. Again, Alomomola or Stunfisk are definitely going to be the Cinderace checks. If I was bringing Cinderace, I would definitely bring a protective pad set to avoid Rocky Helmet and Static and things like that. But I'm not bringing it, so don't even have to consider that. I do think Spiritomb is probably not that likely against my team. And the main reason for that is that I don't think the Dark typing really does much for him. It's his Dark type, but he's got better resist to Darkrai than Spiritomb, and Lucario kind of just still touches it with, like, it's a Dark type that's not weak to fighting, which I guess is good for Lucario, but it's really hard to tell why Spiritomb would want to come against my team. It doesn't really do anything. Whereas a lot of his other walls actually have like niche options they can use against me. Amoonguss, for example, can get a Spore off, can clear Smog, stat boosts, things like that if I were to be Nasty Paw Darkrai. Alomomola obviously has Wish Pass for it, going for it. Miltank can also set up rocks, so there's just, yeah, I just don't see that with Spiritomb. It's kind of weird that Spiritomb is even on this team, but it functions as a Dark against Psychics, but there's also Reuniclus here, so it's sort of backwards to me, but there you go. In terms of what I'm bringing, first up here is Qwilfish. Again, you notice his only removal is Torkoal. I made a note weeks ago when the transaction deadline was up that his only removal is Torkoal and that Spike Stack would be effective. He's won 6 games in a row, and most of them have been gigantic wins because he pretty much just pivots around into all of his Pokemon over and over and over again. And he's got a bunch of fat stuff, and then he can pivot into something that'll actually do something, like a Zygarde or a Diancie, and picks up a kill, or like a Reuniclus, and picks up a kill. So he's got like a triple regen core going on, and the best way to deal with regen cores is by setting up hazards to stop regen from actually doing anything for them. So I am bringing Qwilfish with spikes to work on that. T-Spikes doesn't really make any sense. I do think that Amoonguss seems relatively likely. So I don't really see a point in setting up T-Spikes when Amoonguss is probably coming. Dusty Bond is just to claim a kill on something that's fat and slower than me, just because I want to get rid of something. Liquidation is there to hit the Diancie mainly, but it's also just an attacking move to break like Celesteela sub or something, or Zygarde sub. I should be slower than Zygarde though. And then Taunt is there for Alomomola in particular, but also can shut down something like the Celesteela from setting up Leech Seed and whatnot on me. I shouldn't be outspeeding no speed Miltank, so Taunt is going to be not very great against that, but I think I'm actually okay with him setting up rocks if I can get up on my spikes. And with this, I can threaten Diancie, and I also have the Shuka Berry there, so I can eat an Earth Power from Diancie, and I can either Shuka Shuka the Earth Power and kill it back with Liquidation if it's weakened, if it's chipped enough, or I Shuka and Destiny Bond, and then I'm able to Liquidation and kill it the next turn, or it switches out and I get to Liquidation twice or something like that. Because I feel like it would want to Earth Power and then like switch as I'm Destiny Bonding on a Loma Mola or something. So I might like spike first and then Liquidation or something like that. But there's definitely a world where this is going to come into play. That's really about it. That's pretty much all there is with Coalfish. I'm running enough speed for something. 244. This was intentional. I'm outspeeding Jolly Celesteela. Coalfish outspeeds Celesteela. Yeah, so I'm outspeeding speed boosting Celesteela, and I didn't make a note, which is just classic, honestly. So that is the idea behind the Coalfish. Next up is Vikavolt. I'm running Safety Goggles Vikavolt. This should handle Amoonguss really well. If it's like offensive Amoonguss, I'm not going to tank the attacks, but if it's not running any investment, then I'll be able to tank Sludge Bombs relatively easily. The poison might get a little bit iffy, but Safety Goggles is there so that I have a Spore Absorber. Webs, I think, aren't necessary, but they can put pressure on like the Buzzwole, Diancie, and Zygarde, so we'll see if I even click them. I don't really need another move besides maybe Mudshot for Stunfisk, although Stunfisk can't really hit me back without running like Rock Tomb or Scald or Surf or something, so I can kind of just Bug Buzz on it as well. Volt Switch gets me out on the Celesteela. Bug Buzz is good for a lot of things, especially Reuniclus. I'm going to outspeed Reuniclus and I can Bug Buzz that in the face. And yeah, that Roost is just there for recovery. I'm running enough speed for no speed Celesteela on the Vikavolt, so I'm outspeeding max speed Celesteela with Coalfish and no speed Celesteela with Vikavolt, so somewhere in between is what I'm expecting him to bring. I do have an Empoleon, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's running like 20 EVs or something like that. But I didn't want to give up more speed than I had to. Like, I'm already running Timid with a lot of investment, so I couldn't really afford to go much more. But the idea is that I can get a super effective hit off on Celesteela. Weakness policy is definitely viable against my team, though. He could definitely just run a Totemized weakness policy and blast through me, so I have to be careful about that. If I don't see an item with Vikavolt, then I'm not clicking Volt Switch. Gliscor, unless I can kill. Gliscor, Toxicor, Poison Heal, just running Stallbreaker with Taunt, Roost, Knockoff, and Earthquake. This doesn't really touch Buzzwole, which is a little bit concerning, especially when Buzzwole has such easy access to Ice Punch, but it beats like Reuniclus. It'll beat Miltank as long as I'm outspeeding it, which I don't think I am. I'm gonna need to look at that. I'm gonna need to look at that and I'll adjust it if I'm not. But it might be 20 EVs. 4 would be base 96. No, 8. 16. 24. Puts me at base 98. So I'm basically outspeeding no speed Zygarde, which is something that I should have written down as well. Yeah, but I want to be outspeeding. I'm going to bold this because I want to be outspeeding no speed Miltank to taunt it. Roost is just obviously there for recovery, of course. Knockoff gets rid of items, which I think is pretty big, especially like leftovers or Rocky Helmet. Really huge. Especially if the Celesteela tries to Autotomize on me. I can get rid of its weakness policy, and then maybe it's not as much of a threat. Maybe just sit on it for a while as it heavy slams and does no damage. And of course, Earthquake is just really good stab after the fact. You know, if Buzzwole doesn't even come and Celesteela is like weakened or something, then Earthquake obviously hits this team really hard. There's no actual resist outside of Buzzwole. So, I mean, Buzzwole is a great Earthquake resist, don't get me wrong, but if it's not coming, then maybe that's not as much of a problem. And there are definitely reasons why it might not come. I do have really good special attackers, and Buzzwole's not good especially defensively. Something else more defensive, like an AV Reuniclus or something, might be a little bit more akin to taking on a Mega Gardevoir, for example, rather than a Buzzwole. But Scarf Buzzwole does have a great matchup against my team, so I'm also worried about that for sure. I don't remember what this wacky EV spread is. I know the HP is optimized for Toxicor, and then from there, I think it's just kind of throwing things in where I had investment. I don't think it's actually like specifically for a reason, so we'll just ignore that for now and move on to actually Slowking first. Teleport, Ice Beam, Toxic, and Future Sight. So Ice Beam hits this team really hard. The ice resists are Alomomola and like Thick Fat Miltank and Torkoal. And I don't think Torkoal's really coming, like I said. So it's pretty much Thick Fat Miltank, which I could see come. I could see it come for Cinder. Yeah, for Cinderace, tanking Power Ball. I do think Alomomola is better at that. Alomomola kind of just sits on Cinderace. Even if I'm like a bulk up set, then I can't really touch Alomomola still. So I think Alomomola would be better for that. Which means maybe the Miltank doesn't come at all. It probably will, and it'll probably come with rocks, but we'll see. Toxic is there for the Alomomola in particular, which would switch into Ice Beam. Teleport gets me a little bit of momentum on the regen team, which I think is useful. And Future Sight punishes absolutely everything. Again, I don't think Spiritomb is that likely, and so Future Sight can punish anything switching into me. I'm just fully physically defensive. This is my Zygarde switch in. Pardon me. This is my pivot into the Buzzwole on Gliscor. So I'll tank Ice Punch, and then I should be able to tank a Leech Life and teleport out or something, or at least threaten the Buzzwole, and then be able to get out, but we'll see how that goes. Again, it's physically defensive. That's pretty much the whole idea. If this is like Curse, Heal Bell, Miltank, I'm probably just going to off myself, because I don't have a way to beat that, but we'll get back to that. Gardevoir's next. I'm running 4 attacks my Gardevoir with Knockoff, Thunderbolt, Hyper Voice, and Psyshock. Funnily enough, this thing gets Knockoff. I'm, of course, running Trace, and this time I know why. First of all, there's Beast Boost on the Celesteela, which I can definitely make use of, and the Buzzwole. There's also Regen on 3 different Pokemon, and Magic Bounce on Mega Diancie, all of which I think are very good in this matchup for me to steal and potentially not Mega Evolve right away. Thunderbolt is there purely to hit the Celesteela, but it'll also hit the Alomomola in certain situations. Hyper Voice is really spammable once Celesteela is gone, because Amoonguss is not going to appreciate Psyshock. So if this is AV Amoonguss, then Psyshock is just going to absolutely demolish it. And like I said, the Psychic Resists... Did I say the Psychic Resists? Yeah, I did with Future Sight. Psychic Resists are not very good on this team. Again, it's probably mostly Reuniclus and Celesteela, but again, I might consider offensive Celesteela more viable against my team. Whew, all of that combined, I'm running enough speed for Zygarde. I think that it's kind of okay for him to run like max speed Zygarde with a Gliscor on my team, so I'm not like aggressively creeping with that. Max special attack, a little bit of HP investment there. Knockoff is mainly there for utility. Get rid of items, get rid of items, get rid of items. My main goal here is hazard stack, get rid of items, get rid of items, get rid of items. Last but not least is Darkrai. I'm also running Knockoff on this, but Specs Darkrai claims lives. This can 2-shot Mega Diancie if it is not defensively invested. I think it's a roll to 2-shot Mega Diancie if it's not defensively invested, and I'm underspeeding it, so it also needs to be creeping something. Now, I am aggressively creeping Diancie, creeping Gardevoir. PokeFan in the past has watched my video, so he may be leaning towards not creeping aggressively, or not creeping at all, I should say, because I have been trending more towards creeping aggressively. But this does allow me to be modest, and I kind of don't care now that I'm able to be modest. Mega Diancie, however, is the biggest problem in this entire game. I don't have anything on my team that won't get 2-shot by it, so Gliscor's investment is pretty irrelevant. Even Spadef Gliscor gets 2-shot by Moonblast, so there's not really a point in running any sort of like defensive Pokemon that could beat Diancie. And that's where we're going to talk about that. Okay, Darkrai, Dark Pulse, again, 2 shots, everything there. Psychic is there for AV Amoonguss and Buzzwole. It's my way to catch Buzzwole if it's AV Buzzwole. And Thunderbolt is there for the Celesteela. Just break through the Celesteela if I really need to just break through that stupid Pokemon. And like I said, Knockoff is to get rid of items. I probably will never ever click Knockoff with Darkrai, unless I really need to get rid of a specific item. Because Dark Pulse is just a better click almost all of the time. So I talked about the speed creep on this already. Max special attack modest, a little bit of HP investment there. In terms of what's not coming, Empoleon could have been useful as a check to Diancie, but it loses to Buzzwole and Zygarde and Stunfisk, so I wasn't super comfortable bringing Empoleon in this one. Lucario doesn't have the ability to break through this team, unfortunately. A special set could kind of do it, but it's not really able to stand up to Celesteela. I know that I actually just killed a Mega Slowbro last game with Lucario, but I don't see that happening against this squad. It's just much harder to pull off, and I don't outspeed any actual threats, unlike against Torn, where I believe I outsped. Excuse me. Lucario naturally outsped things like Rillaboom, Nidoking, and Xurkitree in that game, and they were the main threats to my team, besides Bexpal Cephalon, which obviously cleaned me up, so that's why Lucario's not here. Golurk, I thought about Golurk, actually. It turns out that it can't even two-shot Buzzwole, so, or it can, but it's a lot more complicated. I wanted to bring like a Power Herb Fly set that beat Buzzwole, but it doesn't even beat Buzzwole. So, Golurk, not the best spot, although I was considering it highly as a breaker. Cinderace also was considering highly as a breaker. I don't think it's that effective in this game. Zygarde can reasonably effectively check it. Alomomola is always a check to it, and it can punish me pretty hard, especially when I need to run protective pads, and I just don't do enough damage to this team with Cinderace to justify it that well. Glaceon is something I was also very much considering. Again, I don't think I mentioned, or I think I mentioned it at some point with Slowking about the ice resists. They're not really there. So Ice and Psychic are pretty solid against this team if you can correctly predict things, or if certain mons don't show up into the matchup. And so I thought the Glaceon had an alright matchup. Glaceon can tank 1,000 arrows. It is reasonably bulky defensively, so it's a decent Zygarde check. But in the long run, I like Glaceon more as a Gliscor check, personally, because Gliscor is a little bit weaker. So that is going to be it from my side of the team. Let's talk about playoffs now. So with our loss to Torn, we kind of put ourselves in a little bit of a hole. I'm currently in 9th place. That is because Hamu is done his season. He's 6-6 plus 1 at the end of the season. So I just need one win, and I'm guaranteed to be above Hamu. And if Stu and Aaron lose, they're both also 5-5. If I win this game, Stu and Aaron both lose, then I will clinch playoffs. So this is kind of a do or die game for me. If I lose this, then I'm going to be 5-6, and I will have to win to get in playoffs. And Lux is a really hard opponent to have in week 12, and it's a really bad matchup for me as well. So I'm not looking forward to next week, and I'm really hoping that I can pull through in this game to make playoffs happen, so that I don't have to rely on my week 12 to make playoffs happen. I don't really care what seed I end up in. I just want to make playoffs, and it's going to be a grind. It's definitely going to be a grind. There is one other way for me to make playoffs, even if I lose both games. It would require Stu and Aaron to both lose as well, to be fair, and I would still have to retain a lot of my differential. But if the standings stay essentially the same, and Brian doesn't fulfill his one extra win. Brian, for those who don't know, took over Vanderill's team in week 8, which is 1 week before I would just call it and FF the team out. And it was in first place, and so I didn't think it was very fair for someone to come in and just scoop up a first place team that essentially has free playoffs at that point. I mean, it was 6-1 at that point. Or 5-1, and then he won his first game when he took over the team. So there were 6 weeks left, and I just said you have to win 3 out of 6 games, and then you can make playoffs. He's won 2 of those 3. He's played 4 games, so he's 2-2, and he's won 2 of those 3 that he needs to guarantee playoffs. But with 2 weeks left, he could still not make playoffs by not meeting that requirement. And so if he doesn't meet that requirement, then I could pull into playoffs as the last seed, because Brian is currently a playoff team and is already at 7 wins. If he doesn't meet the minimum, he would be knocked down, and then whoever's in 9th place would slot into the 8th seed of playoffs. So those are kind of my paths to playoffs. There is only Mike. Mike is the only person clinched so far. There are a bunch of people eliminated. There's 5 people eliminated at the bottom of the table. So it really is only everyone with 4 wins and below after week 11 is eliminated. So it's actually only between me, Stu, and Aaron on the outside of the table right now, and we're all at 5-5. I have 9 differential on Stu, but he is head-to-head. I have 13 differential on Aaron, and I have head-to-head. So we could get into some tiebreaker scenarios depending on results, And that's why I really want to win this week and make sure that none of that has to happen. So that's going to be it for me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys for the match against PokeFan and the Detroit Oblivion Wings.